Record na ba ni? Okay, yes. Okay. So, di ba, we have defined criminal law as that branch of public law that defines crimes, treats of their nature, and provides for their punishment. Diri sa criminal law, book 2, makita nato ang definition sa crime, ang pagtratar sa crime, o ang punishment kung mukomiter kag crime. Okay? So, allow me to share my screen first. Window. Here. Visible ra akong screen, guys? Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay. So, there are some things nga kailangan ninyong mahibawan in criminal law 2. In criminal law book 2, guys, there are several titles. Okay? Daghan na siya mga titles. Ang una na ang title 1. Also, ganahan ko nga, ug mag-study ta aning criminal law 2, doon na mo'y notes ha, or doon na mo'y at least codal ka ng revised penal code. You can see the revised penal code sa Google. Pwede rin yun nyo ma-download, or you can buy a codal provision or a book in a Rex bookstore or Central bookstore. Makakita ra mo dito libro. Makita ninyo di tanan. Now, going back to what I said earlier, ang kaning criminal law book 2 na ay nagkadaiya nga titles. Okay? Mao ni siya ang title 1 to title 15. So, every title, lain-lain ang mga crimes nga gi-provide or gi-enumerate. Okay? Ang title 1 provides for crimes against national security and the law of nations. Ato ning tagsa-tagsa uno niya ha. Unsa man ning mga crimes against national security? Ang crimes against national security would include treason, conspiracy, and proposal to commit treason, misprision of treason, and espionage. Ang naapo diri ang provoking war and disloyalty in case of war, piracy and mutiny on high seas or Philippine waters. Dayon ang Title 2 provides for crimes against the fundamental laws of the state. Naa diri ang katong mga arbitrary detention, violation of dwelling, mga dissolution of peaceful meetings, crimes against religious worship, which we will be discussing one by one later on. Ang Title 3, guys, diha pod ang crimes against public order. Diha nimo makita ang rebellion, ang kudeta, ang conspiracy and proposal to commit kudeta, rebellion, insurrection, nasa diha inciting to rebellion or insurrection, naa po diha ang crimes against legislative bodies and similar bodies, naa po diha ang illegal assemblies and associations, naa po diha ang assault, ang resistance and disobedience, which is very relevant sa inyuhang profession unya in the future when you become police officers. Naa po dira ang public disorders, evasion of service of sentence, naa po ang commission of other crimes during the service of penalty imposed for another previous offense. Ang Title 4, diri nimo makita ang crimes against public interest. Diri makita ang forgery, mga counterfeiting, mga falsification, and other forms pa of falsities. So diri tagsa-tagsaon sa nato later on. Unya ang Title 5 provides for crimes relative to opium and other prohibited drugs. Kani amended naman ni siya sa kanang law on illegal drugs. So or the Anti-Drugs Act, no? So, ato po itong i-discuss ang Anti-Drugs Act. And then, ang Title 6 provides for crimes against public morals. Diri makita ang gambling, ang offenses against decency, mga grave scandal, immoral doctrines. Unya, ang Title 7, guys, mao ni siya ang crimes committed by public officers. Diri sad nato makita ang nagkadaiya nga mga crimes nga pwedeng i-commit sa usa ka empleyado sa gobyerno, okay? Nadiri ang mga malfeasance and misfeasance, bribery, malversation, infidelity of public officers, nadiri ang mga disobedience, refusal or assistance and maltreatment of prisoners, nadiri tanan, ato pod na siyang tagsa-tagsaon. Title 8 provides for crimes against persons, diri ang triling. Nadiri ang mas interesting kayo nga study. Unsa man mga crimes against persons? Naa diri ang parricide, ang murder, ang homicide, infanticide, na duel, physical injuries, and of course, ang rape. Okay? Ang Title 9 provides for crimes against personal liberty and security. Diri naa ang illegal detention, kidnapping, slavery, and servitude. And then naa po diri ang abandonment of helpless persons and exploitation of minors. Naadiri ang trespass to dwelling, mga threats and coercions. And then in Title 10, you will see there the crimes against properties. Unsa man mga crimes against properties mo ni katong theft, robbery, mga brigandage, mga usurpation, mga culpable insolvency, nadring staffa, mga other forms of deceits, nadiri ang arson, nadiri ang malicious mischief. And then in your Title 11, you will see the crimes against chastity. Naadiri ang acts of lasciviousness, mga seduction, abduction, mahibaw mo unsay diferensya anang seduction, rape, what's the difference between those terms, unsay kalahian na with acts of lasciviousness. So na in Title 11, that's crimes against chastity. In your Title 12, naadiri ang crimes against civil status of persons. Naadiri ang simulation of birth and usurpation of civil status, mga illegal marriages. Unya, Title 13 kay crimes against honor. Diha ta makaton na ng libel, mga defamation, online libel, diha natutunan in that title, Title 13. And then lastly, Title 14, quasi-offenses, kanang mga criminal negligence, kanang wala gituyo, upon you will be held accountable because of your negligence. And then of course, ang Title 15 is only pertains to the provision and application of laws enacted prior to this code and the repealing clause. And then if we have, we will no longer discuss the special laws because you have penal laws, no? So having said that, let's now start our discussion by starting off with Title 1, Crimes Against National Security. Unsa to atong gisgutan? Unsa to yung mga different crimes against national security? Guys, napamuriha?
Treason, ma'am.
Treason, ma'am.
Yes.
Attorney.
That's number 1. Treason, okay? Yeah. Yung sa to na to ang naamay nagkadaiya nga mga crimes against national security, treason, conspiracy and proposal to commit treason, misprision of treason, and then espionage. Napoy crimes against law of nations, kaning inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals, violation of neutrality, correspondence with hostile country, flight to enemy's country, piracy in general, and mutiny on high seas or Philippine waters. Let's start off with Article 114, treason. Uy, nadoble ang Article 114. How do we define treason? When we talk about treason, defines crimes, treats of their nature, and provides for their punishment. Dili mo makita. Any person kono who levies war against the Philippines or adheres to her enemies, giving them aid or comfort within the Philippine Islands or elsewhere, shall be punished by reclusion perpetua to death. Okay? Nanang pa, tanawa, gipakita tas definition, gipakita tag unsa pagtratar, gipakita ta sa punishment. Okay? It shall be punished by reclusion perpetua to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 4 million pesos. In the past, this is only 20,000 pesos. This was amended by RA 7659 and RA 10951, wherein gipatasan ang penalty for treason because 20,000 is very gamay ra, di ba? You can always betray your country kay 20,000 raman di akong bayran, di ba? So giamindar ni sa balaod and the penalty would now become not to exceed 4 million pesos, okay? Remember also the element that no person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses, at least to the same overt act, or on the confession of an accused in open court. Ang requirement gid ana at least na duha ka witnesses, okay? On the same overt act or confession sa akusado mismo in open court. Likewise, an alien. Isa ning alien, guys, kanang gikan sa outer space. Alien pasabot foreigners, okay? Likewise, an alien residing in the Philippine Islands who commits acts of treason and as defined in paragraph 1 of this article shall be punished by prison mayor to death. No, this is not prison mayor. This is reclusion temporal. Okay? Wala ko na-edit. Reclusion temporal to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 4 million pesos. Okay? Ilisi na ha kung namo dahi notes. This is already reclusion temporal to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 4 million pesos. Now, what are the elements of treason? The elements are the following, that the offender, timan guys, nga, when we talk about an offense, okay, an offense, a person that is subjected or that is accused of a commission of a crime cannot be convicted without satisfying all the elements of the crime. Okay? Munang kailangan mong makahibaw sa mga elements because when you become police officers and when you prepare affidavits, kailangan in the affidavits that you prepare na satisfy yun diha ang tanang elements sa crime. Okay? So, unsa may mga elements sa treason? Una, that the offender owes allegiance to the government of the Philippines. Unsa man ang allegiance? When we talk about allegiance, ang pasabot ani nga this is your obligation of fidelity and obedience which the individuals owe to the government under which they live or to the sovereign in return for the protection they receive. Okay, timan your fidelity and your obedience, okay, which you owe to the government under which you live or to the sovereign in return for the protection that you actually receive. Okay? That is what is meant by allegiance. Kita, doon na tayo allegiance sa gobyerno. Nga naman, because naman tayo loyalty and fidelity niya because we receive benefit from it, okay, from the government. We expect that we will be protected, di ba? So, we owe allegiance to the government of the Philippines. That's the first element of treason. Ikaduha, that there is a war in which the Philippines is involved. Timan nga ang treason, why mahitabong treason kung dili ta involved sa war? Okay? There has to be a war, and that war should be a situation wherein the Philippines is involved. Panalitan ang nagubat kay ang Russia ra og ang kisa to ang kagubat sa Russia. Kisa gitong kagubat sa Russia. Ukraine. Ukraine. Ang kagubat nagiging laban ta sa Russia, di watay mahimo kung natay residente nga mag-spy dito paingon sa Ukraine. Gumikan kay di man ta party to the war. Okay, there's no treason in that particular area because we are not a party to the war. Okay, remember in treason there has to be a war in which the Philippines is involved. Okay, ang ikatulong nga element is that the offender either levies war against the government, okay? Ning levy siya og war against the government. Unsa man ang levying of war? Unsa may pasabot anang levying of war? Pasabot nga na siya gi-assemble nga mga tao gyud unya ang iyang purpose is to execute the treasonable desire from or by force, okay? The treasonable design by force. Nagbuhat-buhat gyud siya grupo sa mga tao niya, iya gyud nga makigubat gyud siya batok sa gobyerno nga magpakita gyud siya nga ning laban siya panalitan nagkigubat ang China, laban sa China. Okay? Mo nang levies war against the government. That's the first one. The offender either levies war against the government or either adheres to the enemies, giving them aid or comfort. Or ning laban siya sa enemies, ang iyang gibuhat sa enemies kay naghatag siya og aid and comfort. Okay? Aid and comfort. So you have to remember these elements, okay? There are also two ways of proving treason. Dapat na siya at least two witnesses testifying to the same overt act o pwede sad nga si akusado mismo ning angkon in open court nga nakakomiter gyud siya og treason, okay? I hope klaro na. All right, so okay, when we talk about aid or comfort, guys, this means that you strengthen or tend to strengthen the enemy in the conduct of war against the traitor's country and an act which weakens or tends to weaken the power of the traitor's country to resist or to attack the enemy. Remember guys, nga adherence alone without giving enemy the aid or comfort does not constitute treason. Okay? Dili treason kung adherence ra kay atong gitan dili tanaw itong be, it has to be you adhere to the enemy and you give them aid and comfort. Okay? Padungog pa muna ako, guys. Can you still hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am. Attorney.
Yes, ma'am.
Sige, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Suppose, guys, nagubat ang Pilipinas ug ang China. And what you did, France, example, is that you provide women to the soldiers of China. Will that be considered as treason? Or is that an act of treason?
Yun sa Manilang women, ma'am.
Ilang maoy nagpalipay-lipay nila samtang nagpahuway sila gikan sa gubat.
Maybe not, ma'am. Not sure.
According to the case of People versus Perez, commanding of women to satisfy the lust of Japanese officers, this was the time of the Japanese era ha kaning kasuha, commanding of women to satisfy the lust of Japanese officers or men or to enliven the entertainments held in their honor was not treason, even though the women and the entertainments helped to make life more pleasant for the enemies and boost their spirit. The Japanese daw were not guilty any more than the women themselves would have been if they voluntarily and willingly had surrendered their bodies or organized the entertainments. The acts here in charge were not, by fair implication, calculated to strengthen the Japanese empire or its army or to cripple the defense and resistance of the other side. Whatever favorable effect the defendants' collaboration with the Japanese might have been in their prosecution of the war was trivial, imperceptible, and unintentional. So according to the Supreme Court, ang pagdani og mga babay ngadto sa mga Hapon o sa mga Chino bakintahay does not constitute treason, especially so kuno if the women give in voluntarily. Okay? So let's now go to Article 115. Article 115 is conspiracy to commit treason. Tanaw na kong definition. When you say conspiracy and proposal to commit treason, this is conspiracy and proposal to commit treason. The conspiracy and proposal to commit the crime of treason shall be punished by prisión mayor and a fine not to exceed 2 million pesos and prisión correccional and a fine not to exceed 1 million pesos. Okay? Ang conspiracy to commit treason, ang penalty niya, prisión mayor or a fine not to exceed 2 million pesos. Ang proposal to commit treason, that is penalized by prisión correccional or a fine and a fine and a fine of 1 million pesos. So, how are the crimes of conspiracy and proposal to commit treason committed? Conspiracy to commit treason is committed when in time of war, two or more persons come to an agreement to levy war against the government or to adhere to the enemies and to give them aid or comfort and to decide to commit it. Ka-remember mo in your Article 8 of Book 1, diba? Kung may conspiracy, it happens when two or more individuals or two or more persons come to an agreement to commit a crime and decide to commit it. Kanong daw mo ng conspiracy nga concept, di ba? There are two or more persons who actually come to an agreement to commit a crime and then decide pagid sila to commit it. Okay? So that's conspiracy. When there are two or more persons who come to an agreement to levy war against the government or to adhere to the enemies and then they decide to commit it, That's conspiracy to commit treason. And the penalty is unsa to? Presyon mayor and a fine of pila to? Pila'y fine?
2 million.
Conspiracy, yes, 2 million pesos. When we talk about proposal to commit treason, ang proposal to commit treason is committed when in time of war, a person who has decided to levy war against the government or to adhere to the enemies and to give them aid or comfort proposes its execution to some other person or persons. Diba kanumdum sad mo in your Article 8 nga when we talk about proposal to commit a crime, this happens when a person actually proposes the execution of the crime to the other person. That's proposal. Wala sila ni-decide of commit. So proposal ra na siya. Even proposal to commit treason is punishable. And what is the punishment? The punishment is prison correctional and a fine of pila, not exceeding how much? How much?
1 million pesos, ma'am.
1 million pesos. Okay? Pila ang conspiracy? Unsay penalty sa conspiracy? Prison
Presyon mayor.
Correctional,
Presyon
ma'am.
mayor.
Mayor.
Pilay fine not to exceed
2
million
million
pesos.
pesos.
2 million pesos. Ang proposal, unsa to'y penalty? Presyon. Presyon. Uy, asa naman mo? Presyon.
Presyon correctional, ma'am.
Presyon correctional. The fine not to exceed pila.
1
1
million.
1
million
million pesos.
1 million pesos.
Very good. Kani, example ni siya of a case of conspiracy to levy war against the government. This is the case of US versus Bautista. Ang hitabo dire, in 1903, junta was organized and a conspiracy entered into by a number of Filipinos in Hong Kong for the purpose of overthrowing the government by force of arms and establishing in its stead a government to be known as Republica Universal Democrática Filipina, and that one Primo Ruiz was recognized as the titular head of this conspiracy and Artemio Ricarte as chief of the military forces to be organized in the Philippines in furtherance of the plans of the conspirators. Unya, si Ricarte, ningari sa Manila from Hong Kong, and that after his arrival in Manila, he held a number of meetings whereat was perfected the conspiracy hatched in Hong Kong. Unya, si naapoy usa ka defendant si Bautista took part in several of the meetings whereat the plans of the conspirators were discussed and perfected. And that at one of those meetings, si Bautista, in answer to the question of Ricarte, assured him, iyong i-assure nga ang necessary preparation had been made and that he held the people in readiness. Oh, nagpasalig yun si Bautista. Okay na, ready na tanan. Unya, ready na yun ang mga tao. So in this case, si Francisco and other defendant was convicted of the crime of conspiracy to overthrow, put down, and destroy by force our government. If you want to read the entire case, you may search US versus Bautista. This can be found in Google. Pwede nimong makita dito sa Google, okay? Timan guys nga ang two-witness rule in treason do not apply in conspiracy or proposal to commit treason, okay? The two-witness rule does not apply to this crime because this is a separate and distinct offense from that of treason, okay? I hope klaro na ninyo ha? Even proposal or conspiracy or even conspiracy and proposal to commit treason is punishable under Article 115. Alright? Aritas Article 116. Article 116 provides for the definition of misprision of treason. Okay? Misprision of treason. Unsa man yung misprision of treason? Ang misprision of treason according to 116 happens when every person owing allegiance to the Philippines, okay, to the government of the Philippines, without being a foreigner, okay, without being a foreigner, and having knowledge of any conspiracy against them, who conceals or does not disclose, gitaguan or wa musaba and make known the same, okay? Wa niya gisulti as soon as possible to the governor or to the fiscal of the province or to the mayor of the city in which he resides, as the case may be, shall be punished as an accessory to the crime of treason. Awang mahitabo ha? Kung di ka mosaba nga duna di ay nagplano nga mo-levy og war against the government of the Philippines and you are a Filipino citizen, you do not disclose it to the governor or to the fiscal of the province or to the mayor or fiscal of the city or municipality, you will be held as an accessory to the crime of treason. Okay? Magkihaan gyapon kag treason although accessory ka. Okay? That's misprision of treason. What are the elements? Ang elements is that the offender must be owing allegiance to the government and not a foreigner, meaning Filipino, okay? Ikaduha, that he has knowledge of any conspiracy to commit treason against the government and that he conceals or does not disclose and make known the same as soon as possible to the governor or to the fiscal of the province or the mayor or the fiscal of the city in which he resides, okay? Timan nga the offender here must be owing allegiance to the government. Dili siya dapat foreigner. Okay? Dili siya dapat foreigner. And then, timan also nga the conspiracy is one to commit treason. The phrase having knowledge of any conspiracy against them has reference to conspiracy to commit treason defined in Article 115. Okay? Maunay gipasabot diri aning definition na to. Nga owing allegiance and having knowledge of any conspiracy against them, ha? Having any conspiracy against them. Kaning linya diri nga having any knowledge of conspiracy means that conspiracy to commit treason. I hope klaro na. Because, of course, misprision of treason man na siya. And then, remember that you have to report within a reasonable time. It depends on the time, place, and circumstances because the revised penal code did not fix the time. Okay? So, the revised penal code states that for individuals, what if you report to some other high-ranking government officials? Example, wala ka or ning report ka sa PNP director. Ningon si Judge Pimentel that the government official of DILG is okay. Okay? It is not limited to the mayor, to the governor alone. As long as mga high-ranking officials lang siya of the DILG, the Department of Interior and Local Government, that is okay. Okay? Okay, what else? Let's go now to Article 117, espionage. Okay, espionage. When you say espionage, the penalty of prison correctional shall be inflicted upon any person who, without authority, therefore, enters a warship. Tanawa ha? Enters a warship, fort, or naval, or military establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plans, photographs, or other data of the confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippine archipelago, or being in possession by reason of public office he holds of the articles, data, or information referred to in the preceding article, discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nature or nation. Okay? Timan nga, the penalty next higher in degree shall be imposed if the offender be a public officer or employee. Okay? Mas dako og penalty next higher in degree kung ang mukometer ani kay public officer or employee. Okay? Unsam din ang espionage. Unsa man ang espionage? When we talk about espionage, this is an offense of gathering, transmitting, or losing information respecting the national defense with intent or reason to believe that the information is to be used to the injury of the Republic of the Philippines or to the advantage of any foreign nation. Okay? Basta mo gather, mo transmit, or mo waog information, mo lose information respecting the national defense. Timan national defense with the intent or reason to believe that the information is to be used to the injury of the Republic of the Philippines or to the advantage of any foreign nation. Okay? Unya, unsa may mga elements, ang elements that the offender enters into the place mentioned in Article 117, unya, wala siya authority therefore, and that his purpose is to obtain information, plans, photographs, and other confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippines. Okay? And then, naapoy lain kaning mag-disclose siya to the representative of the foreign nation of the contents of articles, data, or information referred to in Article 1 of this article, which he had in possession by reason of public office. Unsa may mga elements ani, that the offender is a public officer, that he has in his possession the articles, the data, or information referred to in paragraph 1 of Article 117 by reason sa iyang public office nga iyang gigunitan niya. He discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nation. Timan kane, to be liable under this paragraph 1 man the offender must have the intention to obtain information relative to the defense of the Philippines. Okay? If ang akusado walay intensyon nga mokuha information relative to the defense of the Philippines, even if he takes possession of the plans or the photographs referred to in number 1, paragraph 117, he is not liable under that provision. Okay? So, kailangan yun nang i-establish unya sa piskalya nga the intention really is to obtain information of confidential nature in relation to the defense. Okay? In relation to the defense of the Philippines. Kung wala na siya nga elemento, dili siya liable under this particular paragraph. Okay? What else? Okay, let's now go to, we've talked about this, espionage. Unya, timan ide guys, nga dili necessary nga ang Philippines is at war with the country to which the information was revealed. What is important is that the information related is connected with the defense system of the Philippines. Also note that wiretapping is not espionage if the purpose is not something connected with the defense. Timan ilang yun ninyo guys. Ang element yun ani is that ang intention niya is to really gather information in relation to the defense of the Philippines. Okay? Unya, dili ni necessary nga naggubat ang Pilipinas with other country. Okay? Unya, ang kana pong wiretapping, kaya ba mo man ang wiretapping no? Kana bitang magbutang mo wiretapping device para makabati mo sa mga istorya sa inyong gi-wiretap. Okay? That is not espionage if ang purpose ana is not something connected with the defense, which is something that has to be proven good when a case for espionage is being lodged within the Philippine courts. So basically, trabaho na sa piskalya. Okay? Let's now go to crimes against law of the nations. Mauman to ang crimes against, unsa ganito nga crimes guys? Unsa ganito nga crimes guys? Crimes against
Security.
Against national security. Okay? Crimes against national security. Nanihapon mo daan, guys? Okay pa mo
Yes,
daan?
Yes,
ma'am.
attorney.
Okay,
Yes,
nakasabot pa mo so far?
Yes,
Thank you,
attorney. Sa attorney.
Yes, we'll just discuss karon Title 1 ha, Title 1 anya. Sa sunod na nga meeting, mag-discuss ta sa Title 2 and then subsequent titles kay para taas-taas ang ato ang discussion. Okay, for now, para kuan lang ni, para warm up, Title 1 na sa ta. So, crimes against law of nations. Ang una diha is inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals. Okay? Unsa ganitong mga crimes under aning crimes against law of nations, inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals, violation of neutrality, correspondence with hostile country, and flight to enemy's country. I don't know kung naka-review na mo sugod anang mga sample ng mga questions, but sa mga sample questions na usually ang mga ang inyong mga question na kay nasa definition pangitan This is a crime that is punished by reclusion temporal, committed by any person by unlawful and unauthorized act provokes or gives occasion for a war involving or liable to involve the Philippine Islands or exposes Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. A. Misprision of treason. B. Inciting to war. Mga ba? So, inyong exams would be memory work, basically. Basta when it comes to criminal law 1, criminal law 2, kasagaran ana analysis of memory work. So, if you are familiar with the definition of crimes, okay ra gid kaayo. So, in this one, inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals, unsa man ni? The penalty of reclusion temporal shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee, and that of prisión mayor kung private individual who, unsa may crime, by unlawful or unauthorized acts, provokes or gives occasion for a war involving or liable to involve the Philippine Islands or exposes Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. Okay? Muna siya ang inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals. What are the elements, ani? Ang elements, ani, is that the offender, kanirang duha guys ha, that the offender performs unlawful or unauthorized acts. Ikaduha, that such act provoke or give occasion for a war involving or liable to involve Philippines or expose Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. Okay? Kani nga crime is committed in time of peace. Okay? Ang intent diri is immaterial. If you commit unlawful and unauthorized acts, unya ang purpose is to provoke or give occasion for a war involving or liable to involve the Philippines or expose the Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property, you will be held liable for inciting to war or giving motives for reprisal. Okay? In inciting to war, ang offender any person, bisag private individual, bisag Filipino, bisag alien, bisag public officer. Okay? Unya, reprisal is not limited to military action. It could be an economic reprisal or denial of entry in their country. Okay? Example, kung si X burns Chinese flag. If China bans the entry of Filipinos into China, that is already reprisal. Okay? That is already reprisal. And then, let's go to violation of neutrality. When we talk about violation of neutrality, ang penalty of prison correctional shall be inflicted upon anyone who, tanawa sad niyo, ang violation of neutrality, who on the occasion of war in which the government is not involved, dili ta involved, violates any regulation issued by competent authority for the purpose of enforcing neutrality. Tanawa ning imposta na ay government regulation nga gi-issue ang gobyerno nga oy neutral tahawa tay labanan, okay? And if you violate that regulation, you'll be held liable for violation of neutrality against Article 119. The penalty is prison correctional. Unsa may mga elements ani? That there is a war, kutubra diri sa 3 guys kutubra aning tulo. That there is a war in which the Philippines is not involved, that there's a regulation issued by competent authority for the purpose of enforcing neutrality, and that the government, the offender rather, violates such regulation. The government here, ang requirement gid ani guys, kay ang government must issue or must have declared the neutrality of the Philippines in a war between two other countries. Okay? What is violated here is the neutrality of the Philippines. Declare kag neutrality, unya ikaw nilaban ka sa pikas or nilaban ka diri sa pikas nga kampo, okay? Congress has the right to declare neutrality. Okay? I hope klaro na. And then we have correspondence with hostile country. Kano sa man ni makommit ang correspondence with hostile country is committed by any person in time of war. In time of war, sad ni siya, okay? Who or shall have, any person who in time of war shall have correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops, okay, shall be punished by reclusion or prison correctional if the correspondence has been prohibited by the government, prison mayor if such correspondence be carried on in ciphers or conventional signs, and by reclusion temporal if notice or information be given thereby which might be useful to the enemy. If the offender intended to aid the enemy by giving such notice or information, he shall suffer the penalty of reclusion temporal to death. Okay? So, unsa may elements, ana, that the Philippines, or it is a time of war in which the Philippines is involved, that the offender makes correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops. Unya, ang correspondence kay either gi-prohibit sa government or carried on in ciphers or conventional signs, kanang mga codes nila, or containing notice or information which might be useful to the enemy. Okay? Unsa din ang correspondence? You might ask, correspondence? Correspondence is a communication by means of letters, or it may refer to the letters which may pass between those who have friendly or business relations. Padalabag suwat ba? Muna'y correspondence, padakag suwat, okay? Even if the correspondence, guys, contains innocent matters, if the correspondence is prohibited or has been prohibited by the government, it is punishable. Okay? Timan A, if the correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops has been prohibited by the government, the crime is committed even if ang correspondence or ang letters ninyo contains innocent matters. Wala diha nag-involve of anything useful to the enemy, because of the possibility that some information useful to the enemy might be revealed unwittingly. Okay? Bisan pag inosente ra na yung sulti-sulti diha, ang rason sa balaod nga nung i-penalize ang usa ka tawo is that possibly daw nga you could reveal some useful information unintentionally or unwittingly. Okay? And then, what else? Timan nga kani nga mga circumstances would qualify the offense kaning a notice or information must be useful to the enemy, offender intended to aid the enemy. This will qualify the crime of correspondence with hostile country, meaning mo taas ang imuhang penalty kung kani ang imuhang buhaton mahimong reclusion temporal to death. Okay? Unya, hostile country exists only during hostilities or after the declaration of war. Correspondence to enemy country, correspondence to officials of enemy country, even if related to you, that's included. It is not correspondence with private individual in enemy country. Okay? Di na correspondence kung private individual ang imuhang padadaan. Okay? If you send correspondence to a private individual. And it doesn't matter if correspondence contains innocent matters. If it is prohibited, that is already punishable. Okay? I hope. Klaro na siya, guys. And then we have the so-called flight to enemy's country. Okay? Flight to enemy's country. The penalty of arresto mayor shall be inflicted upon any person who, owing allegiance to the government, attempts to flee or go to an enemy country when prohibited by a competent authority. Prohibited sa niha, tanawa ha. Inflicted by any person who, owing allegiance to the government, attempts to flee or go to an enemy country when prohibited by competent authority. What are the elements? Una, that there is a war in which the Philippines is involved. Ikaduha, that the offender must be owing allegiance to the government. Ikatulo, that the offender attempts to flee or go to the enemy country. And then fourth, that going to the enemy country is prohibited by competent authority. Timaning a mere attempt already consummates the crime, okay? And again, there has to be a prohibition, okay? Kailangan ang gobyerno na-declare nga you are prohibited from going to that particular country, okay? If it's not prohibited, well, there's no crime committed. There's no violation, okay? And then, timan-i nga, an alien resident may be guilty here because the offender may either be Filipino or a resident alien. We will discuss piracy, mutiny on high seas, or on Philippine waters next meeting, guys, because lengthy man siya and I want this to be also a comprehensive discussion. Kanang dali. So we'll have our discussion on this one by Monday. By Monday pohon, Section 3, Piracy and Mutiny on High Seas or in Philippine Waters. Do you guys have questions? Kasabot ra ba ta?
Yes, attorney.
Sure. Wait sa ako sa i-download yung attendance. Okay. Masabtan na guys or pas ra? Kira? Gutom na mo.
Madalar, attorney.
Lara. Can you guys turn on your cameras para mag-picture ta? Pang attendance. Kung maka-turn on mo camera, if possible, that would be highly appreciated. Okay. Oh, nagid sila mga kuan nagid sila, chill lagi sila mo balayon. It's nice to see you guys and it would have been better no if we've seen each
Excuse me,
other.
attorney. Same time nagyapon ta next meeting, attorney.
Yes, Faith. Faith, imong pangan? Faith, imong pangan doy? Quintes?
Yes, attorney.
Oh,
Yes, attorney, yes.
okay. Same time lang ta.
Asan ako, attorney? Okay. Thank you, attorney.
Available naman mo la City, di ba? Monday?
Yes, attorney. Available, attorney.
Sige.
I
Okay.
don't know with the others, but me, yeah, I'm available. Thank you, attorney.
Thank you. Sige. Mag-picture ka. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Wait. Balik na. Natin si Faith. Kajit lang. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay. Thank you guys for joining our class tonight. See you on Monday. Amping mo.
Thank you, attorney. God bless.
Ma'am.
Thank you, attorney.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, attorney.